Sometimes you can catch yourself watching a fairly ho-hum horror movie, and you kind of go, why am I enjoying this so much? Then you realise that, for better or worse, one or two of those horrible murders were actually quite enjoyable. With growing concern, I'm Sean Ferrick for What Culture Horror, and here are memorable deaths from terrible horror movies. Number 9, Peter Stum, Saw 5. Saw 5 was a warning sign that the popular horror franchise was running out of ideas, with traps becoming less inventive and characters even more cookie-cutter. But one consistency from the series is that it knows how to deliver a highly entertaining twist ending. During the film's final moments, Peter Stum finally has Hoffman, aka Jigsaw, at his mercy and traps him inside a glass coffin. But his alleged victory takes a dark turn, because once we hear the opening notes of Hello Zepp, we know something's about to go down. True enough, we learn that Stum was supposed to place himself inside the coffin as the walls start closing in. Despite his valiant efforts to escape, our hero is helpless as he tries all means to save himself. We then witness Stum being slowly crushed to death, all while Hoffman watches his nemesis' final moments. In a series full of gory and painful deaths, Strom's demise remains one of the most brutal out there, and at least manages to end a fairly terrible movie. Positive note? Number 8, Melody, Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2022, despite the initial promise, was yet another botched attempt at reviving the long-running horror franchise. The characters were flat-out unlikable, and the requel failed to capture the spirit of the original. Despite its major flaws, it does pay tribute to the 1974's original's classic ending. Lila and Melody seem to have survived the horrific events of the film as these siblings exit the town by car, but the two celebrate too early as Leatherface returns and pulls Melody out of the vehicle. As Lila helplessly watches on, we see the iconic killer chop poor Melody's head off with his signature chainsaw and proceed to do his chainsaw dance. Is it high art? Of course not. But Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2022's ending manages to leave audiences entertained. It also helps that fans were divided on Melody's character, with some finding her too unsympathetic for accidentally causing the death of the elderly Ginny. And so the loss of Melody's head was seen as no big loss by horror fans. Number 7. Steamroller Girl, Maximum Overdrive. Stephen King's Maximum Overdrive was the prolific author's attempt at making his own feature film, and while the movie is better known for its campy trailer starring King himself and the Green Goblin truck, one scene does succeed in making the audience wince in pain. One of the biggest taboos in the horror genre back in the day is killing a child. However, Maximum Overdrive doesn't pull its punches as it features a brutal death scene of a youngster. When the inanimate objects start killing a local baseball coach and his little league team, an imposing steamroller crashes through a backboard. One of the kids falls from her bike, and as the object slowly approaches her, we see the child get crushed by the steamroller, complete with the sound of her bones being crunched. Understandably, the scene was heavily censored, as the uncut version showed more the child's head popping. Yet, despite this, Maximum Overdrive still deserves some props for including such a shocking, memorable death scene in a mainstream horror movie. Number 6. Paige, House of Wax. 2005's House of Wax was a remake nobody asked for, and fan reception got even worse due to the casting of Paris Hilton. You see, the heiress was at the peak of her popularity at the time, and with her fame came many who absolutely hated her. So seeing Hilton's involvement in a remake of a beloved horror movie was a big red flag for horror fans. Thankfully, both Warner Brothers and Paris were self-aware enough to create a marketing campaign titled See Paris Die, which promised audiences that they would be able to see Hilton get killed on screen. She even created a line of t-shirts in conjunction with that campaign. And so, the slogan promised, Paris's Paige does get killed during the middle of House of Wax. In a lengthy sequence against the sinister Vincent, Paige seems safe until the killer throws a pipe that impales her in the forehead. It's a grisly death for the heiress, one that was met with cheers from audiences, and so if there's one thing you will remember from the House of Wax remake, it's seeing Paris Hilton's on-screen death. Number 5. Ledward, Alien Covenant. It's safe to say that Alien Covenant isn't anybody's favourite film in the series, with characters making fairly idiotic decisions left and right, and unnecessary retcons to the xenomorph mythology. But if there's one scene that captures that spirit of the 1979 original Alien, it's the backburster scene. Earlier in the film, Ledward steps on some spores which secretly enter his ear. Though seemingly harmless at first, we as an audience know better and that trouble is coming. And wouldn't you know, his condition gets progressively worse to the point where Kareen has to take Ledward back to the ship to see what's going on with him. She tries her best to help, but then Ledward's spine starts protruding from his back as he convulses in pain. An alien creature called the Neomorph then bursts from his back, killing Ledward instantly. Ridley Scott amps up the gore and body horror in this scene, and for a while we get a sequence that captures the Alien series flawlessly. It's painful, it's visceral, and much like the C-section sequence from Prometheus, is a noteworthy scene in an otherwise very flawed movie. Number 4. Dan Jordan, A Nightmare on Elm Street 5, The Dream Child. Dan Jordan was one of the characters from A Nightmare on Elm Street 4, The Dream Master, and was likeable enough to survive Freddy Krueger's latest killing spree and live to tell the tale. But by the time the sequel, The Dream Child, came out, our male lead wasn't so lucky. En route to his girlfriend Alice, we get a fake-out death sequence where Dan is nearly killed by Freddy when he is thrown off his truck. Realizing it was only a dream, Dan gets on his motorcycle, but things get even worse as the dream demon then fuses Dan with the vehicle. It's a special effects spectacle as we watch poor Dan transform into a biomechanical monstrosity that is worthy of H.R. Giger. He then wakes up to his immediate death as his truck collides with another vehicle, killing him in an explosion. Though A Nightmare on Elm Street 5, The Dream Child showed that the series was suffering from franchise fatigue, Dan's death remains an effective one. Not only is it a great showcase of practical effects, but it is one of the most cruel kills Freddy has ever committed. Number 3. Hunt Wynorski, The Final Destination. The Final Destination is the worst entry in the franchise, with terrible special effects and even worse characters. One genuinely notable scene in the film, however, is Hunt Wynorski's death in the swimming pool. Hunt is one of the movie's principal characters and one of the most obnoxious in the entire series. He's horny, insensitive, and does not care for anyone but himself. After he harasses a kid at a public pool, Hunt gets his comeuppance when his lucky coin falls into the pool. He swims to retrieve it, but due to death's design, pool drain sucks Hunt in. It is a lengthy sequence where Hunt is stuck underwater, unable to reach the surface. And if slowly drowning isn't painful enough, things get worse as his internal organs are sucked in through his bum. We then see the aftermath as protagonist Nick watches the pool's drainage pipe explode with Hunt's blood and guts. Part of the charm of this scene is the Final Destination's tongue-in-cheek approach to its deaths. Earlier on, a racist is killed as Why Can't We Be Friends is playing. Here, Hunt, who's written as an asshole, has his own sucked in by the pool. Number 2. Jon Strode, Halloween, The Curse of Michael Myers. The early 90s was a dark time for the horror genre. Franchises like Friday the 13th and A Nightmare on Elm Street had started to fizzle out, and Halloween was no exception. Case in point, Halloween, The Curse of Michael Myers, was released in 1995 and is considered one of the lowest points in the entire series. Curse suffered from executive meddling which led to different cuts of the movie, and the result is a jumbled mess. Still, one rare highlight, especially in the theatrical cut, is the death of Jon Strode. The character was a hateable one due to his physical and emotional abuse of his daughter Kara, so when Michael pays John a visit, it's definitely a well-deserved death. Myers lifts Strode up and impales him to a fuse box, which electrocutes him, with wounds and boils forming around John's face and foam pouring out of his mouth. Finally, his head explodes in over-the-top fashion. The producer's cut of this 6th Halloween may be considered the better version, but a character like Jon Strode has a more fitting end in the theatrical cut. Number 1. Julius, Friday the 13th Part 8, Jason Takes Manhattan. Friday the 13th Part 8, Jason Takes Manhattan is infamously known for failing to live up to its title. As in, Jason is barely in New York as most of the film takes place on a boat, and the movie is ultimately one of the worst entries in the franchise. Thankfully, one scene that managed to make a lasting impression is Julius's death sequence. Julius is a boxer and is lucky enough to survive the deadly boat ride to New York, but in a vain effort to fend off Jason Voorhees, he decides to fight the masked killer one-on-one with his fists. We then get an extended sequence where Julius delivers some strong blows against Jason and does enough damage to send Voorhees toward the edge of a New York City rooftop. Sadly, brave Julius's stamina finally runs out and goads Jason to give his best shot. The famous slasher obliges as he punches Julius's head off his body, sending it flying in the air and landing perfectly below. He should have quit while he was ahead. I'm sorry, I couldn't help myself. That is everything for our list today, folks. What did you think? Let us know in the comments below. Do you love these films? Do you take issue with the very suggestion that perhaps they are not pure perfection in celluloid form? You can get in touch with us over on Twitter at WhatCultureHorror horror, and make sure you are subscribed here on the channel. I am Sean. You can find me at Sean Ferrick on the various socials as well. Look after yourself until I see you again. And, you know, if you're going to be in a film, try not to be the best bit of it by dying. Thanks a million.